Welcome back to Beyond Mortgage. I'm Dan Trinidad, and I'm excited to talk to our guest today, Rhiannon Bolen. Rhiannon's a longtime veteran of the mortgage industry. She's currently a regional sales director at Mortgage Capital Trading, a mortgage hedge advisory and secondary marketing software firm. Welcome, Rhiannon.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Dan. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So for our listeners who are predominantly loan officers and realtors, but a little bit of, people all over the place, maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about your journey in our industry and how you got started, because I know it's been your career.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about your journey and, to get to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I actually early on, I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. And I started early on, actually on the operations side of things. And I got into mortgage like 60% of us do through my family. My mother, I'm a child of mortgage. My mother was in the industry for a long time. And, prior to that, I was basically in an industry that was kind of not going anywhere, and so needed some opportunity, and it presented itself through some contacts that my mom had, and so I kind of started out, just answering phones, and back then, doing DU and LP and clearing conditions and doing things kind of on the underwriting side of things, so to speak. And then I eventually went to work for a mortgage insurance company on the operations side, where I was in underwriting. I guess you could call it a junior underwriter, except back then it was a lot of automated stuff, right? So, processor, junior underwriter type thing, whatever you want to call it. And then enjoyed that for a little bit, but an opportunity presented itself when we had someone move into another role on the sales side of things. And so I was in my early 20s when I was doing that, and I basically had zero experience. But the gentleman that I eventually ended up working for, I went into his office and set my very minimal resume on his desk and asked for an opportunity, and he hired me. So that kind of began my path into business to business sales. So I've always been in business to business sales, so never anything where I was interacting with consumers. I spent the majority of my early career on the mortgage insurance side of things. So, more in credit default and credit risk and that sort of thing. But, being in that industry and working for mortgage insurance companies, it's an industry that historically has invested a lot in their employees. So over the period of time that I spent there, we had a lot of sales training and a lot of coaching. And I really, spent about 12 years with PMI Mortgage Insurance, which when the crash hit, they eventually went out of business, and then went to a few other mortgage insurance companies. And ultimately that led me to an opportunity with ArchMI, where I was a regional sales manager. And that was kind of my, I guess you could call it, first experience with being a manager. And I had the opportunity to build a team of remote salespeople. And that was just an amazing experience, and loved that opportunity that I had there. And then, things change in the industry, and certain circumstances are sometimes beyond your control. And so ended up, spending that time there, had a great experience, and had to move on, and kind of went and did something completely different, where I was back into a outside sales type role and sales management type role with Lenders One, which is a mortgage cooperative, and then finally ended up landing over here, fairly recently on the secondary side of things, same kind of role in outside business to business sales. And doing things as we're a hedge advisor at MCT. So, working and helping our clients, helping lenders to be more profitable through hedging and mandatory executions. And so,
Wow.
Primarily just business to business outside sales for the most part, whether it was in individual contributor or manager roles, is where I've kind of built my career so far.
Wow. Yeah. No kidding. Start out in ops and or just really front desk, and then ops, and into sales, into sales management, into regional sales.
Yeah.
Man, you've seen it all. So, in this crazy world, where we talked a little bit about it before the call, but we're, faced with this pandemic, and it seems to me like you've had experience. I mean, you've obviously had experience prior to this with managing remote sales people, and
Yep.
maybe you could share a little bit of your thinking of how you successfully manage people remotely, and how do you uh, in a situation like this, I'm faced with, how do you keep the culture, how do you manage the culture, how do you improve on the culture when you don't gather? Maybe you
Yeah.
could share on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the time, there was certainly opportunities where we were able to get together. So while we were remote, we still did have the opportunity to see each other face to face. And, we had team meetings and different things where we would come together, or conferences or things like that. So we did get the chance to see each other. So it wasn't totally like we are now, where we're kind of in isolation and can't see each other in person, which it's interesting, because I think that people that are in those types of roles, where they're used to being in sales, probably loan officers as well, are probably struggling a lot more than folks that might be on the operations side of things, where they're not used to interacting with people as much. And I'm a touchy-feely person, I'm a hugger. And so I'm sure this is very challenging for people that are in some kind of a sales role, because they like to have that, that interaction, and look at body language and things like that, which are all kind of, I think, important to the process. But back, when we were, managing remote salespeople, I think it's, or just, any team in general, just, consistent communication, I think is really important. We had, a number of regular interactions where we would meet and discuss strategy. I think as a manager, I think it's really important to set very clear expectations, but also gain buy-in from the people that you're working with. And so, I kind of liken that to rather than saying expectations, kind of making an agreement with one another. Here is sort of what the company's objectives are. Tell me what you can do. I mean, are the expectations or the goals and objectives, are they realistic? And hopefully you can have candid discussions around whether they are or aren't, and come to an agreement of where you can mutually move forward and agree on how you're going to achieve the targets that have been set. So I think that's really important. Just being clear about your intentions, and for me as a manager, I even in my day to day, I really enjoy having the opportunity to help someone else succeed. So whether that's in a management capacity, and providing, listening to different types of approaches, and hearing what they say, and providing constructive feedback for what someone's saying to you, but again, also making sure that that's something that they are willing to absorb. Right.
Right.
And so that comes with, at the beginning, I think of saying, hey, here's how here's how I would like to work together. I'd like to get your feedback on how you think that our relationship can work, and how do you communicate? What's the best way for us to communicate? And then, kind of embark on that journey. I mean, managing people is an absolute long-term strategy, because there are different personalities and different
Right.
ways that people approach things. And you have to be, I would say that I have, I liken it to, I'm kind of ADD with a side of OCD, or sometimes the other way around. And so I definitely have my way of doing things. And in a management setting, you have to let go of some of that stuff a little bit, because not everybody is going to do it the same way. And so you have to really approach it with a listening ear. To understand, how someone that might be working for you is doing it, and then give, that feedback, and as an opportunity for them to incorporate into their own process.
Yeah, it's
and
clear
so
and
that
honest
regular type of interaction, I think, is important.
Yeah, clear and honest communication. So how many people are on your team?
Right now, we have a team of about 6 people.
Okay.
I'm not managing anybody directly at the moment. This was in a previous life, but we had, at the time, we had 9, sometimes 10, depending on
Okay.
how many people we.
So
have the
right now,
region.
your customer is are mortgage banks, mortgage,
Correct. Yep.
um,
So
and
mortgage bankers, financial institutions. Yep.
so how many? So how are you communicating with customers? How do you go out and acquire new customers in a
Yeah.
B2B situation when you can't visit them and
Right.
have a cup of coffee with them and get to know them? How do you go about that?
Yeah. It's definitely posed a challenge right now for sure. It in the moment, given of course what we do at MCT is we're a hedge advisor, so market volatility is a real challenge for our clients and what we do. So we have had to be we've had to have a lot of communication, provide a lot of tactical advice, and be very empathetic to what's happening with our with our current client base. And you kind of have to approach, I think, non-clients in the same way, because just because they're not a client of ours currently, they're still going through the same things. So it's been it's been a wild ride for the last couple of months, or call it 6 weeks or so. So I think right now for me, it's just really important to approach my interactions with potential new clients as just having a with empathy, let's say, and maybe not focusing so much on on how we can begin to do business together. I mean, that will eventually come, but right now it's important to understand how they're doing personally, how their family's doing, how their business is doing. And if there's opportunity for for me or for us to provide value in some way, then that's what the goal would be, right? And
Right.
down the road, hopefully that's something that is valued and remembered, and that will all come. But a lot of this is so much about the relationship that you build, and the value that you bring to the table.
Absolutely.
And so you just have to. That takes some patience, and right now it's probably more patience than than some of us would like, right?
That's what we're teaching too. So our originators, they go out and establish relationships with real estate agents, builders, financial advisors, and we're teaching the same thing. I mean, people have to first know you. They have to know who you are, then they have to like you, and then they have to trust you before they're doing business with you. And so I actually think that the environment that we're in right now, everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's at home. So approaching them is a little bit easier. You know where they're at, you know what they're struggling with, and it gives you a reason to talk about the personal situation that we're all dealing with, which is how are you, how's your health, how's your family, what do you
Yeah.
do to cope, and that allows people to get to know you a little bit, and perhaps like you, and like you said, over time those conversations turn into hopefully relationships, trusting relationships
Yeah.
in business.
Yeah. And eventually, if it can get to the point where there is an opportunity to understand a little bit better about what they've got going on in their business and in their
Yeah.
world, that's where I would approach that with, a really good, set of questions that I'm posing to them, just to really get a true understanding about what they've got going on. Right. So,
Right. Right.
in sales for me, it's always been more about talking less and listening more. And so, I think that's kind of a contradiction sometimes in sales in general, that you always want to sell, and you always want to have, the solution, which is a completely understandable thing. And because people, people in sales typically want to help. But, even in my past career as a manager and stuff, I've always tried to turn that on its head, and try to have it kind of switched around, right? Don't approach it with you're trying to give as much information, or what you can give. Just sit back and, for lack of a better way to put it, close your mouth and just listen.
Just listen. Yeah, you
Yeah.
learn a lot when you listen. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So tell us a little bit about the women's group that you've started in Texas.
Yeah. There's been so much movement in this space, right? You had the Empower with what Marsha Davies is doing, that I think has just taken off, and she's done such an amazing job with that group. I've had the good fortune of being able to, in most of my roles, be involved at the MBA level, and had the opportunity to be exposed to that. women's, women's empowerment and women's issues have always been a passion for me. Like I said, my mother was in the industry before, and she's run companies and run divisions and different things like that, and has been in leadership roles. And so I have a shining example of someone that was in this industry that represented sort of a powerful, executive, a powerful female executive. And so having, come from that, I've always had this passion of wanting to do what I can to sort of give back in that sense. So about, a year and a half ago, so I'm on the board of the Texas Mortgage Bankers Association, and TMBA is, that's the acronym for it, is one of the larger, if not the largest, state association in the country. And so we have a lot of exposure. We have great, very well attended events, but we didn't have any kind of a separate group that would just address, maybe, women's, progression in our industry and women's empowerment. So we sort of hatched this idea about a year and a half ago of starting a subset or a networking group of the Texas Mortgage Bankers Association. And at the time, a great friend of mine, Paulina McGrath, who's the president of Republic State Mortgage, she and I had the conversation, and I presented the idea to her, and she was also president of the TMBA at the time, and she just let me run with it. And wow. So I'm forever thankful for her for letting me do that. And so what we did was, we created this networking group, and we agreed that we would have our own separate events that would be held in conjunction with Texas Mortgage Bankers events, which we at the Texas Mortgage Bankers side of things, we have 3 events throughout the year. And so what we did was we kind of set aside a separate amount of time in conjunction with those events, but our goal was to invite and interact with women in the state of Texas in the mortgage industry that may not otherwise have the opportunity to attend state or national events. So maybe they aren't going to conferences, maybe they're, the operations managers or the processing manager or the underwriters or something like that, or even in some kind of an executive role where they're leading, but they don't get out of the office, right? So what our objective was to, target the folks that could go to those events, but also the ones that couldn't. And we do our events all over the state. So we have usually one in Austin or San Antonio, one in Dallas, one in Houston. So it presented a perfect opportunity to geographically reach these women that could come into our events for a couple of hours out of the day, provide them with value, provide them with great content. And one of the things I think that I'm most proud of, and that we get the most, it's by far our most popular thing that we do, are these networking open forum roundtables at our events. And that's where we have a speaker or some kind of a panel, and then we follow that with these open forum roundtables where we have moderators that sit at the table wow. and navigate the discussion. And I'm telling you, it's been so powerful. We've had tears, we've had laughter, we've had just the most amazing reaction to that approach, that I've just been, beyond proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And we've doubled in size in the year and a half that we've had this thing going. So as you can tell, it's a true passion of mine, and I'm just excited to, we actually just did a webinar today for the group, and we're trying to continue to provide value even while we're, remotely based. So,
wow, I love it. So how many people are in the group?
You could call it about 150 right now.
Wow, good job.
It's a little different because it's a subset of the TMBA, and so it's all kind of based on attendance of our what was our previously in-person events. So so we're gaining some ground for sure, and it's been great.
So give me an example of some of the topics or content that you discuss that is opened up for women.
So we've had some objectives of having our speakers or our panelists or whoever is going to be speaking at the event be based in Texas and be in the mortgage industry and a female in the mortgage industry in Texas. And we are fortunate in this state that we have a lot of women leaders. We have a lot of women C-suite executives, presidents, CEOs, COOs, and different things that we have this pool of women that we can pull from. And so there've been a number of different topics that we've approached. Some of which could be finding work-life balance, how to progress in your career, how to build a personal brand, and we always try to come to these things where we have presented a panelist or a speaker with a specific topic that carries through to our networking roundtables, and then we have moderators that sit at the tables that have been prepared with questions to pose to the group that kind of gets the creative juices flowing. And so it's a lot of it is also based on feedback that we receive from the group, because we always send out a survey and ask for the feedback from what they'd like to see or what they'd like to talk about. And we've got some very engaged women, and they give us their opinions. And if we have something that sticks out, we incorporate it into our future event.
Wow, that's so cool. So, I mean, you're developing new friendships as well, and you're working inside your passion for sure. So how do you split up that time between this organization and your actual job?
It's definitely something that I'm doing in a volunteer capacity. I have to say I'm pretty fortunate in the fact that my company is very supportive of this, and so
I would think your business grew from it, right? Your business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's sort of a hidden element. I do it because I love it and I'm passionate about it. And but the hidden element of that is, I mean, you are gaining exposure for yourself and your own brand and your company's brand. So that's kind of the hidden element as well. I would say some of it's done, after working hours. Some of it's done during working hours, depending on what we're doing. If it's an event or something that we're putting on, that's during the working day. And then some of the prep is maybe done at other times of the day, just depending on what we have going on. So it's just a matter of, being intentional with my time and trying to figure out. And I will say I have an amazing support group of women that are involved in this and on what we call the host committee. That help us plan and come up with ideas, and they actually operate. We also have a mentor matching program that we rolled out at the end of last year, and so we've paired mentors with people that want to be mentored, and kind of those are also the women that help with that. So they've been an amazing support group.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about balance. Clearly, you're balancing work in this organization, but how are you balancing those two with your family life, with your health and relationships, and everything else that goes along with life?
Yeah. Throughout my career, I would say that I have invested a lot of time and money into myself, for how I manage my time and how effectively I use my time. And so honestly, I time block my days. Depending on what I have going on and what tasks are on my list, I prioritize my task lists, and I ensure that I'm addressing the most pressing items before the least pressing items. So for me, it's just consistency, being intentional with my schedule. It's really important that I maintain my health. I couldn't do what I do without, I wouldn't have the energy that I have if I didn't build in, working out and being active, and in this environment where we are today, it makes it a lot easier because I don't have to travel. I don't have to get on a plane. So we can get up basically every morning and work out and start.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, we do.
Start each day working out?
Yep. Yeah, we probably, if it's not, 7 days at 6. So we try to do that, but we also have, kind of a little setup in the garage, and we, and my husband and I work out together, and it's a great, we enjoy that time, and enjoy. Both of us are in sales and outside sales. So we're both used to, being remote, but also being on the road and traveling. So having the time to do this now, and it'll be interesting when we go back, because I'm gonna, wonder where my workout time went. But it's really important to me. It's always been, I kind of look at that as, you eat, you sleep, you work out. It's just part of the routine, right? Because like I said, I wouldn't have the energy that I have, to be able to travel and do the things I want to do if I didn't do that.
Right.
And then just time with my family too. That's important. That's what we do in the evenings and on the weekends. And I don't cancel that time with them. So.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and to have a spouse that has empathy for what you do, because you guys are in the same line of work, and you've got children. You've got a couple children at home.
2 boys, yeah,
Two
two
boys.
boys. Older, they're older, so I'm not sitting in a situation right now where I have to keep an eye on little ones running around. I've got an almost 19-year-old and an almost 14-year-old. So they're very self-sufficient during the day, and their school's done a great job of keeping them engaged, and they have certain times they have to be, on their Zoom calls and stuff. So they've been scheduled.
Congratulations. Those were tough years for me and my kids. But that's great. Congratulations. Well, that's really awesome. So how are you preparing? Like, what's next? What do you think the future of our industry looks like? How are you preparing for and preparing yourself and people you work with for what's next?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how this changes our reality. I do think, uh, given that I've been most of my career in outside sales and sort of being used to being on the road and being face to face with people, I've had the opportunity to build some very strong relationships through that, and through the time that I've spent doing those types of things, which has left me in a position now where at least I know a lot of people, and I have strong relationships, and I can interact with them, and they'll take my call because they know me. I think what is going to be interesting and possibly a challenge for those types of people in those types of roles, is that you're missing out on some of the networking and the meeting new people that you might not otherwise have if you don't have the conferences that you go to, or the meetings that you might set up, or that kind of interaction. Because I think it's going to probably be a while before we do that. I would be surprised if we're going to conferences before 2021, to be honest. And so you have to, me personally, I've done my best to be visible. Given my position on the board of the TMBA, I have tried to offer up opportunities to participate in webinars that maybe we as a company or me myself would facilitate, through the TWMB, the women's group. We've done that as well. And, I'm getting more comfortable with video and getting more comfortable with being, showing my face on a webcam. And I think that's probably going to be how things continue for a little while. I think from, like companies that have, large, commercial space, I think it will be interesting to see how that's reconsidered after we come out of this, because from what I hear from my friends in the industry that work at, large lenders or something like that, the productivity has been through the roof. It has for us as well. We're fully remote, and we've been able to do our job and do it, in a very productive manner. And so given that, it'll be interesting to see if there are new strategies around percentages of time that employees might come into the office, or not at all, or having options for being remotely based some of the time. Now, I do think that not everybody can be remotely based. I do think it takes a pretty self-disciplined person. And I think a lot of times the people that aren't know that they aren't. And so if given the option, they may not want to be working from home. They may want to come into the office, right? But I think that flexibility within those expectations might be a thing of the future,
I totally agree.
So it'll be interesting, and for the commercial real estate space, that might be a bit of a challenge, but for companies that could possibly save on overhead, it might be a great opportunity, right? So
there's no doubt that I think things are going to really change in that area. I think we're going to be, at least now. Prior to this, I was a little nervous about allowing people to work from home more than they were at the office. I was okay with days here and there, but man, I like what's gone on. We have
yeah,
been way more efficient. Communication is getting better because we're forced to communicate more frequently. And man, yeah, I think things are going to change, and we're being forced to change. That's usually how things happen in this world. We're forced to
yeah.
adapt. My
Yeah, I've always been remote, so for me, it's been something I'm kind of used to, with the exception of driving to the airport and getting on an airplane. But it's for some people it can be daunting, and for others they may have found that hey, this works really well. I can my commute time is a minute from the bedroom to the office or wherever I'm setting up, and you think about that, and the hours in your day that you
no
otherwise
question.
might be driving, you're being productive. So it just and who knows, with the younger generation, as we get more people into our industry, I don't know that that type of thing is innate necessarily. It's something that you learn over time, and how to be strategic and how to manage your time well. And so there might be where some of the younger folks that are coming into the industry would need some kind of an office setting,
Yeah.
and have the opportunity to be exposed to that before. Yeah, who knows? I think it'll be interesting to see how it
It
goes.
presents some challenges. I need more operational support, and finding people is a challenge because we're remote, but finding people we can do. But how do you bring them new into your company when they're not meeting people and learning the culture and the energy? And that's what I'm struggling with. We need new loan processors, and I'm struggling with how we go about doing that. And my brother's a fairly new loan officer. He's in Austin, Texas, and uh, started probably 6 months ago, and is faced with this, and he's having a struggle with, okay, I could look up real estate agents and builders and financial advisors, but getting to meet them and get their energy and personality has become, a little more challenging
Oh yeah.
for him. So that does
Well, I think
present
it's
its
that,
challenges.
bringing new people into organizations in the situation that we're in right now. I think it's going to take a much more, there'll have to be a much more tactical approach to interviewing people, and the types of questions that you ask. I haven't interviewed people in a long time, but the whole, EQ, or emotional quotient, that with the questions that you ask around that, I think will be super critical, because you do need to, as in a remote setting, when you're trying to interview somebody and determine whether or not they're a good culture fit, there's going to have to be some of those questions that are that you can figure out if that's the type of person that would be a good fit for
Yeah.
your company.
Yeah. No, that's good. So do you see any comparisons between 2008 and today?
uh yeah, actually, I think interestingly enough, this I think, unfortunately, might be a little worse than then, only because the speed at which this all occurred, from our perspective, and what we have seen, with on the investor side of things, where they have just completely backed out of buying certain types of loans, or they're not pricing certain types of loans. I mean, it was a Friday when we had government lending available below 680, and that following Monday we didn't.
Didn't.
Yeah. So that that speed with that this all occurred is I don't think anything like we've really seen. I think it's possible that we recover a lot quicker. But I mean, look at the unemployment numbers. I mean, that's just
That's the
they're
really unknown.
oh, it's how how long until these folks are able to get back to work, and You know, there's also, you know, some challenges on the forbearance side of things, and how, you know, part of the reason that we're having the challenges with investors buying loans right now is because there's some uncertainty around
Right.
the forbearance issue, as it's, you know, totally publicized. Everybody's aware of what's going on there. And so I think that presents a challenge in and of itself, because it's still being worked out, all the while people are losing jobs and not making payments. And then, you know, investors get anxious and they're uncertain, and they don't know, you know, whether or not they can continue to buy certain types of loans, and so they don't. And so, you know, that's remains to be seen how much deeper that goes. You know, and there's products that I think our industry could really use right now that we really can't offer in a great way. You know, cash out refis, or something that's a little bit of a challenge for folks that are selling to, you know, investors and to aggregators. And that's not really an outlet that's available. And I think that there's a lot of people that could really use that product right now. So
For sure. Do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better, or do you think your opinion?
I do. I think that's where the correlation between then and now comes in, because then I was in the credit risk space and the credit default space. And so what we did was, you know, we measured levels of default, and a lot of it had to do with FICO and product and LTV and all of that. And so back then, you know, as the products exited, while they went a little bit slower, not as quick as they have done recently, it was the things like the lower FICO lending. It was cash outs. It was investment properties. It was second homes. It was all these products, and, you know, and investment properties and second homes haven't yet been touched. So you got to think that's probably still coming. You would think. That's my opinion. It hasn't happened yet, but that could be, you know, back in my career, back in the credit risk days, those were the products that went away. You know?
Yeah, I think the main difference that we have between 2008 and today is, I think, you know, the mortgage industry caused
Right.
the problem back in 2008.
Yep.
I think now is we'll be able to bring us out of it if everything falls in line. The whole
Totally
forbearance
agree.
issue.
Totally agree. I think we have a distinct opportunity to be the hero in this one, and try to really help people. And that's, you know, in the bottom line, all of us in this industry, that is at the core of what we do. And so, you know, if we have the opportunity to help someone that's in a challenging situation take cash out of their home, or refi to get a lower payment because they're experiencing issues with their employment or their income, you're totally right. You know, the first one was kind of on our shoulders, and this one is on our shoulders to hopefully help resolve.
Sure hope
So
so.
I
I
hope we
think
get
we
the
can.
opportunity to do that.
I agree so much. Rhiannon, I want to thank you so much for you giving us your time today. I
Oh
really
yeah, I
appreciate
appreciate
it.
it.
It's been a pleasure getting to know you. How can people reach you?
Well, I'm definitely, you know, definitely on LinkedIn. You can see my profile. And ironically enough, we just the Texas Women Mortgage Bankers just did a LinkedIn webinar for effectively building your profile. And so my profile will look different after today, because I have copious notes that I took about things that I need to do to change it. But I'm out there, pretty active on LinkedIn. You know, in the context of what we do here at MCT, if there's any help that we can provide with, you know, hedge advisory services, or, you know, helping you understand, you know, your servicing values, or how you're valuing your servicing book, or lock desk services, or anything related to the secondary market in general, anybody can call me. And my email address is rbolen@mctrade.net. It's also in my LinkedIn profile. So I'd love to help with that. But also just, you know, if there's any you know, Texas women mortgage bankers out there that would like to get involved with our group, come join us, and you know, would love to have people involved that way too.
Well, that's great. Well, I may be in touch, because I want to learn a lot more about the secondary market. I've got a lot of questions. I mean, I know the secondary market. I just have a lot of questions, as, you know, the pricing of servicing these days and all
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
We'll talk about that
It
another.
matters. It all matters.
Holy cow, no kidding. Rhiannon, thank you so much for your time,
Thank
and I
you.
look forward to talking more with you.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Stay
Appreciate it.
healthy. All right, bye-bye.